Circle Time, the Early Years podcast. I'm Glenn Denny. I can't believe we've made it to season 4 already. Now, not only have we made it to season 4, but we're doing a season first because I've got not one, but 2 guests at the same time. The doctors will see me now. I'm delighted to have returning to the podcast, Dr Lala Manners, but joining her, I've got Dr June O'Sullivan. I'm using the posh title, ladies. Welcome to Circle Time.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
very much.
This is brilliant. It's so good. I mean, Lala, I last saw you at Nursery World as well. It was so finally good to meet you in person as well, which was delightful. And June, it's the first time that we've had a chat and everything. I know we've tried in the past, but just you are a very busy lady to tie down as well. It's a bit like Lala. Trying to tie the pair of you down to talk has been, it's a tricky one, but it's so lovely to have you both here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we're going to talk about. I hate this. I mean, I'll be honest. I hate this term because it just throws up so many visuals I don't like. School readiness. It's for me. It just makes you think of children just sat at tables, very rigid and very boxed in almost. Where it just gives me shudder. It just makes me shudder. But what does it mean to you two?
Well, I think we have to be quite honest in that every educational system in the world has some concept of being prepared, being poised, and I guess sort of ready for whatever experiences they are faced with. And it's no different for us. I mean, we happen to have ended up with a particular system. And in the system, conceptually, early childhood is not valued as something of itself in itself. It is seen as a means to an end, a means to becoming a useful member of society, an economic plus, if you like. And I think if you see childhood as that, then inevitably you need to justify whatever funding is spent. And if you have to justify that, you have to have goals. If you have goals, they have to be assessed. And you end up with a very particular way of looking at early childhood, which doesn't align with many, if not most, teachers and practitioners' experience on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's this misalignment, this misfit of what is expected and actually what is happening. Uh, and I think it's a very sort of philosophical question. You know, what is it for? If you grow up in Japan, the point of early childhood is to learn to fit in, to be part of a community, to be responsible,
Mm-hmm.
to think about others. It's a very, very different approach. So I think we have to be honest, firstly, as to what early childhood is seen as, and then try and tease out what we can ameliorate of it that actually doesn't work for us on the ground. What would you say to that?
Well, I think that's a really interesting starting point. And I think the other thing we have to remember about here is that our children are going to school earlier and earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's, I think, where there's disconnect between what school readiness is perceived to be and what actually the children are ready to do. And I think that there's a sense that there's a rush to get them to a point that they can operate at, say, when I went to school. Well, actually, I went to school. I was 3.5, 4 anyway. But,
Mm-hmm.
with this idea of being ready for reception. And actually, I think what we're talking about here are young 3-year-olds quite often.
Yeah.
And so the tension, I think, is how do you accept their developmental stage and the learning and they have a pedagogical approach that's realistic and sensitive to those children, And then how do you then ensure that they're not disadvantaged when they go to school and they have to manage things that the school expects them to manage? And
Hmm.
then across that bridge, where do you fit with parents about how you navigate that conversation so that it doesn't look like it's a blame game and parents are being told off because their children are not ready. They don't understand what ready means because for them, their little 3-year-old is still a baby, is the way they see them. And so, and the schools kind of expecting them to be able to navigate the toilets and sit and listen and take simple instructions and take their coats off and hang them on their peg and all those kind of things. So I think they're the tensions that are not being properly explored because we're being bounced into policy decisions and solutions without really unpacking the nuance of the whole debate
Hmm.
properly within our own sector, where we are much more of the skilled experts of this. I can't tell you how many children have passed through my hands over the past 20 years. But none of them have ever left the nursery not toilet trained. So,
Yeah.
these kind of what you call them, kind of like they're kind of like campaign slogans
Mm.
of sort of being nappy ready, and scary stats like 1 in 3 not being ready are just not helpful in developing the narrative about what is a child getting ready for? Are we getting them ready at the right stage in the right way? Are we
Hmm.
supporting parents to help them to understand what getting ready means? And are schools also being so panicked now by GLD and good levels of development that their rush to measure all of these things so that they hit those 75% targets uh, is losing the child. And then my only worry about this is that the child kind of gets blamed. Well, they can't do this. Well, she can't do that. Oh, well, she won't sit still. Well, this, that, and the other. Well, yeah, but she's 3, and naturally she wouldn't be able to do those
Yeah.
things in a normal environment. So I think that's it, and I think that's the challenge with the European model, where they're much more um, paced in the way they kind of prepare the child along that kind of kindergarten school
Hmm.
journey, whereas we are very much into the rush them in, get them into school, get the parents to work. So I think there's the tensions, and I think Lala has kind of outlined them as a philosophical debate, and where we have that philosophical debate, because at the moment it's becoming quite toxic. So if you have the debate, you're either on one side or the other. Well, actually, no one's on any side. We're just trying to explore this whole thing and how do we figure out how to, create a solution.
And I think also the often the voices, not just of children, but for the people who actually do the work, who are actually in these classrooms day in, day out. I think what they have to offer and what they see can often be completely forgotten, that it's not valued, and it doesn't, what they have to offer in terms of experience and observations just isn't factored in. And I always think the New Zealand
Oh
model
yeah.
of feeling of looking at the reception year or the year before formal schooling proper, as they call it, the borderland. And
Hmm.
the borderland has its own very particular rhythms and ways of doing things. And it's very, very sensitive to each child. And it's very much a collaboration with the parents, with the environment, and everybody has their voice and everybody is valued. And if you look at early childhood as a sort of obstacle course where everybody can co-create, it is going in one direction but can meander around a bit. And the children will like some bits, they will dislike some bits, they'll find some things easy, they'll find some things really, really tough. But in the end, everybody gets there in their own time, in their own way, and it's right for them. And I
Hmm.
think this is where, we can learn a lot from the Pickler approach, that actually every child is very different and they all get there eventually in their own time.
I think also that in terms of the work I do at Leaf, where we particularly work in disadvantaged communities and
Hmm.
stuff, for me, this whole thing is a social justice issue. Because social justice in early years is about fairness, it's about equity, it's about a child's voice and agency, it's about compassion, it's about sustainability. And when you kind of filter those bigger issues through the lens of a child, then these debates don't always listen or hear the voice of the child in some of this stuff,
Yeah.
but also they tend to not necessarily reflect some of the wider issues that families are navigating. Now, I'm not suggesting that because you're in, poor, that, you can't get your child ready in the basic ways of toilet training, put your coat on and all that.
Hmm.
But I think sometimes what happens is those communities get pointed to much more, and it becomes just an added issue of a deficit issue, and also an issue of that whole where social justice isn't actually operating. So, like, I think the the debate around school readiness at the moment is kind of in a way masking a much deeper conversation about social justice and what we mean for children and how we approach those things, and also how we position the early years education and care within that conversation,
Hmm.
and what's so important, and then and therefore and the kind of pedagogical kind of rationale for how we address these things, because quite often the language of pedagogy, which is the way and the how we lead the children to learn, and the way we operate the art, craft, and science of teaching, gets completely lost in this, and it becomes much more an end product, just a measure. How many can do this? Can they do this? Without really following through the pedagogical pathway that gives our sector real confidence about its ability to do
Hmm.
exactly what Lala was saying and meet the needs of individual children in a phased and paced way, rather than in a feeling, oh, they're not getting up there, and so then an obsession with one particular area of learning. We hear it a lot about, numeracy, literacy. We hear that we've had the whole phonics debate for years about all of that. And what's missing is that just the ordinary ground rules, just the ordinary basics, just the
Yeah.
ordinary things about just a little child finding their way around a nursery, just as a pathway, not talking, not singing, nothing else,
Mm.
just getting in there and just getting a sense of where their place is in that building. And we just don't, we seem to be rushing them for everything, and
Hmm.
they really need time.
And that first, I always think that the first term, they really need, it's this idea of doing school. So before the learning starts, so
Hmm.
doing school is finding your feet, knowing where
Yeah.
things are,
Mm.
being all right in a new
Yeah.
environment. I mean, we don't, with babies when they come in, they have a key person and they have somebody there who's there for them all day, every day, and time is spent, and suddenly that's all taken away. There
Hmm.
is no person who's going to be there for them that they can go to be looked after all
Mm.
day. These are big classes, they're noisy, there's a lot going on. They're very bright.
The bathroom is
The
often
bathroom's
outside.
miles away.
Yeah.
So if you're sitting there thinking, where is the bathroom? Am I going to hate lunch?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, I've got the wrong shoes. Everyone else is in better shoes. I mean, all these things loom large in their
Can you imagine?
worlds, and you can't
It's
sit
stress.
there being faced with a phonics lesson when you're fussing about yourself. And I think
Hmm.
this is where the book comes in,
Mm.
that 90%, if not 100% of what is on the list, and yes, we can question why a list is
Hmm.
even relevant, but that's what we have. And so we looked at all the things that are on the list and looked at the physical
Mm.
underpinnings of them all. And there's a lot we can't get right for children. I mean, inevitably, but there's a lot we can get right. And if we look at the physical element and the movement element that underpins all this stuff, actually, we can get them to what I would call a place of safety,
Mm.
that they will be able to manage whatever in their own way, whatever they are faced with during the day. And I think that's the reason for writing the book. It's not a sort of, this is what you will do, and this is, the effect. It's have a look at the physical underpinnings, and get that bit right, and then other things will fall into place. They always say
Hmm.
if your body is functioning well, actually your mind quite often follows. And it's no different for children. What is good for us is good for
Exactly.
them.
Which is precisely why we wrote that other book.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which is, because the original book we wrote together,
Think, feel, do.
yeah, basically was written because the notion of well-being was becoming, and sort of feeling good about yourself physically and emotionally, was almost becoming a separate issue. And what we
Hmm.
were saying was, actually, it's about the whole day, and the stuff you do with the children is as good for you as it is for the children. So kind of indulge in the things that you do. So if you're going for a walk in the air, and watching the leaves fall and experiencing a light breeze and all that, and you're talking about how the children, it's not just a learning experience for the children, it's also an experience for you. When you say encourage the children to drink more water, you drink more water. When you're lying on your back doing yoga with them, and you've got your breathing buddies on your chest, you do it and enjoy it. So it's often what happens is it's sort of like two separate things, but that really is not always helpful, I think, in
Hmm.
terms of the experience the children have and how the day pans out for them. And how, I think, to Lala's point, and I've definitely learned a lot of this from Lala, about just how powerful your sort of your body is in terms of your learning, and how you really, really learn with your whole body. And I
Hmm.
guess at the moment it does feel like we're learning, we're being kind of encouraged to teach the children skills that are not interconnected but are separate. And I think for little children, that's really, really hard. And for little toddlers, little 2-year-olds, who can spend up to 10 hours a day with us, that
Hmm.
is extraordinary demands on a small child. And I kind of think it goes back to the point which we've never really resolved, is what's the point of, early years and childcare? Is it simply as a place where children are kept safe while their parents go to work? Or is it a place for children to explore and develop and
Hmm.
become themselves?
And I think for learning, if we want children to learn happily and effectively, it all starts with their body, to be able to move well and have a reliable, consistent, strong, agile, balanced body is really important.
Hmm.
So move well, eat well. I mean, some of the lunch boxes we see, and I'm sure some of your listeners will see, are absolutely
Hmm.
shocking. And
Mm.
if you're eating really not great food, that is going to have an effect on your mood, on your
Energy
energy
levels. Mm.
levels, all
Hmm.
that. And you need to sleep well. And
Yeah.
again, this comes back to this is really school readiness, being able to manage your sleep and your food and your movement, and begin to take some sort of responsibility. I mean, they know about drinking water, washing hands, all that, a lot through COVID, but it's also about, I am tired. What am I going to do? I need to move. What can I do? And this is
Hmm.
all very, very important. And in Eastern Europe, they're very keen on young children beginning to take sort of a lot of interest and some responsibility for their bodies, making
Hmm.
decisions, the right decisions for their bodies. I mean,
Mm.
you only have one body that's got to last you a lifetime. So the sooner you actually respect it and understand it, I think the better.
Which is precisely why we're going to write the book from that perspective. What can you do? What is possible to do? What is, within the normal milestones, rather than the
Hmm.
expectation of being able to do stuff that you can't, like lining up at the same time and they're all going outside at the same time. But to do that, everyone has to wait for everyone to have got their coats and hang. And there's three staff there, and I always say the first three staff, the first staff member, take four children out. Open
Hmm.
the doors, take them out while we're all waiting here, so that they're all not pushing and uncomfortable and
Yeah.
everything else. So sometimes I think we create routines and we have a misunderstanding of children's abilities that creates an environment that's uncomfortable for them. And so somebody comes in and looks from a kind of an external perspective and sees this kind of jostling and the kind of noise levels going up and the kind of discomfort. And instead of thinking, well, maybe it's the pedagogy that's wrong here, think, well, it's the children can't sit still. They can't do this and they can't do that. So they kind of impose more of it on them rather than less of it. So instead of saying open the doors and let them out, they kind of say, if you don't behave and, if you have to wait. And I know in primary schools as well, and I remember this from my own children, that if you misbehaved in school, you lost your playtime. Now, to me, that
Mm.
was cruelty because
Yeah.
often you lost your playtime because you couldn't cope with the demands of sitting still the whole time. It didn't make you a bad child. It just made you a child that didn't manage that sort of experience for longer. And the one thing that would have benefited them was to go outside and play, a word we need to make sure that is reflected in everything we do because it's a word that's under a lot of threat these days.
Yes.
But to go outside and play in a whole, in their own sort of self-independent way, and that's taken away from them. The one thing that would make things better for them, is reduced. So I think there are all those kind of conversations that to be had, and if they're being led by people who don't understand how children learn and how children develop, then you will get these situations, and then you'll get policies being made on those kind of slogans of 1 in 3 children not ready for school, and they're all coming to school in their nappies. And so consequently, we reinforce the wrong message, and the only ones who really suffer are the children. And probably their teachers who are really caught in the middle, I think, of some
Mhm.
of this stuff.
Sorry, Glenn, we haven't let you talk.
No, it's okay. I mean, it's fascinating listening to both of you. I mean, the one thing that's kind of like stood out for me as well when you were talking as well is that kind of difference in environments. Like you're going from a nursery environment, which can be very, very movement led, where the
Yeah.
children are free to get up and move
Mhm.
and like those gross motor, those fine motor, and they're very, very child led. So all of a sudden, the very, very formal
Mm.
kind of school classroom, but even,
And I
going
think
to
that, yeah, I
reception.
think for a lot of children, and if you think of the age difference, which could be a year
Mhm.
Yeah,
in
totally.
that
Yeah.
in those classrooms,
Some are born.
it's really, really difficult for many children. And you think, a lot of them may have English as a second or third language. A lot of them will be new to English.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So not only are they not being given opportunities to communicate with each other and move together and negotiate together and do a lot together, but a lot of them are struggling with actual, tuning into English. I mean, English is pitched very high.
Mm.
And if you come from countries where the language is pitched much
Mhm.
lower, it's incredibly difficult to tune into English. It takes a long, long time. And if they're not hearing English at home at all, this means it's just those hours during the day when they are having to manage their bodies, the loos, the food, different cutlery,
Yeah.
getting dressed, undressed, and processing all these instructions, which may just float over their heads. So I think as a sector, we have to be much more vigorous in pushing back and going, do you know what? This year is really, really hard for many children. And
Mhm.
these are the reasons why. And this is what we've said in the book. These are the issues that children face. These are why they are issues. And this is how we can really support and help them navigate the day successfully and with some joy.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing as well. That I think June, you briefly touched on it as well. And I know this is something that's trying to move forward in Scotland is like, do we need reception? Do we need year one? Should it be like a kindergarten stage, where children have got that freedom to play and to move and to build that
Yeah.
understanding of the school environment, but just being allowed to play. Like, do we really need the rigidity of things like having to sit down for phonics and having to sit down in groups for this and that, whereas, it is a real juxtaposition between how we set up a nursery environment and how a school environment is set up. And I know they are completely different, but at the same time, it's a massive leap for children to go from one to the other.
Mm. Very true.
Yes, and as I said, particularly, if they're very small and they're only children, so they may not have any experience at all of this. They may have parents who have not been to school themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that this we have to be very very aware of. And I would say spend at least the first term, as I said, doing school,
Hmm.
learning actually how it works, learning the
Yes.
sort of behaviors that are expected, learning how to manage their bodies, manage the food, manage the different smells, manage other children who may be twice their size. There's a lot to deal with. And honestly, if we had to deal with this, I mean, a lot of us wouldn't manage at all.
Mm.
And if we had to cope with all these huge experiences day in, day out, actually mostly on our own.
Hmm.
I mean, yes, with some help, but mostly they're having to work it out by themselves. We would find it extremely tough. And I think we need to really respect the fact that the majority do manage reasonably well. But for those who aren't, we need to be hugely aware of why they may not be managing so well and really look at the physical underpinnings, which often hold the key to their being able to do it better for them.
I guess also if educators and teachers listening to this are probably thinking now, what can we do in relation to preparing these children before they hit the reception class?
Hmm.
And it is interesting because I think your point, Lala, about age and maturation is a really important one. Because like across the nurseries, the Leaf nurseries, you go into the preschool classes where the children are at the top end. So they're 4.5 and nearly 5 by the time they go into reception, which is the age you
Mm.
should be going into it.
Hmm.
They're much more prepared, and the teachers have done a lot of work with them to sort of the sort of plan the day and create a pathway for the day. So, for example, just managing. So, for the mealtime. I remember one of the nurseries I went into not so long ago, and at a leaf nursery, you're sitting around the table, it's all very social, you help yourself, and it's all very nice cutlery and proper delft and all of that stuff. And then you go into the school and you're on a plastic tray where you
Hmm.
kind of got to pick everything up and you've got to manage it on your own and you've got to kind of figure out how to sit down and find your space. So that is a big deal of a thing. And
Hmm.
so preparing them for that so it's not such a shock from the kind of cozy, let's all sit down together, let's find your placemat type thing to this is important. So there is something also that we can do that helps prepare the children for exactly what Lala was saying, which is the kind of the day, the rigor of the day, the order of the day, the essentials of the day,
Hmm.
including taking the children to see their classes. Sometimes that's impossible because they're all going to different schools.
Yeah.
Sometimes the early years teacher comes and meets the children in the nursery. Sometimes they don't. It's all very random as to how this happens.
Hmm.
Whether we can put some order around that is something. And I think then it's about like one of the things that I know one of my team did recently is they got the school uniform
Yeah, I think that works
Yes.
well.
and they
Yeah.
prepare the children by teaching them how to put it on and put it off and what the bits are and how they have to wear it and all that sort of stuff. And that
Hmm.
went down quite well because it was done within a play-based role play area.
Yeah.
And they made their own, the uniform for the dollies and oh, the whole thing was uniform fixated. But I think there are certain things like that we can do, but it's very noticeable how you can do that very effectively with your top 4.5 year olds, hitting 5, but the little 3.5 year olds that are going to go to school, often with no notice, who kind of suddenly there's a place available for them, in they go. Then you have less time to prepare them for some of the realities of the school environment, which technically should not be that different from nursery because they still
Hmm.
should be operating under the UIFS. But the point I think Lala made at the beginning is often the classes are bigger, the space is bigger, you're going in the main school gates, there's a lot more children, it's noisier. Some schools insist that the children come to assembly at least once a week, where they have to sit still and watch what's going on, which is
Hmm.
often above their pay grade, really. And I think all of those things. So I think one of the things that we will be definitely looking at is like what would be the steps into that stage so that at least we kind of can prepare them and at age and stage. So back
Hmm.
to the days of Mary Sheridan, when you looked at ages and stages,
Hmm.
and kind of at least have a broad outline of what is possible. Because what we're trying to do is trying to get children as young as 3 and sometimes now even 2 to go into a school environment or a school-based nursery, but with the same preparation as a child age 4.5, who's going to cope with it so much better.
Yeah.
And if you think when we were all growing up, we didn't go into school till we were 5,
Hmm.
and there was probably a reason for that. At 5, we were probably a lot more able to cope with the change in the environment than we would have done at 3. And then you're also from a nursery, you're going from a ratio of, 1 to 8 to a minimum of 1 to 15.
Yeah.
Um, and often only the one teacher with maybe 20, 24 children and maybe a helper. And nowadays, with the increase in children with, SEND, there will be a number of children in those classes that have additional needs as well. So there could be other adults kind of around and other behaviors they've never noticed before, the children. So
Hmm.
there's a lot to get used to. In that, and so there's a lot policymakers need to be thinking about as to why there's this rush to have those children in there, and could we not have a more phased and a more child-friendly approach to
Hmm.
preparing them for school? Because as Pickler says it, but so does most other people, and certainly in Europe they say it. And if you take your time and you get there in line with maturation processes and development, they all get there in the end anyway. So I never understand why it's so important for a 4-year-old to be able to write their name. Why? And they're not signing checks. They're not writing letters. What's
Hmm.
the issue? If they write their name very well at 6, and we know that that's more stable in the longer term of their education in school, and they're
Hmm.
more likely to be more able to cope with it, why is there this rush? Why do they need to know some of these things at 4.5, 5, when it makes no difference to their educational outcomes in the long term if they pace it a bit better. Now, if you said to me, oh, well, if they don't acquire everything by the time they're 4.5, 5, then they're not going to be able to progress. I would say, okay, fair enough. But we know that actually pushing them through and trying to get them to a particular stage earlier does not mean it's secure, and therefore
Hmm.
it doesn't mean it actually advances those children at all. But what we do know is if they have a proper play-based education, well differentiated, with plenty of extension, in a very environment rich with language and literacy,
Hmm.
and numeracy built through play-based approaches, those children really thrive. And
Yeah.
actually, it stays with them, and you don't see that drop in the 8-year-olds that we see in primary school, which is very hard to pick up from.
And I think interestingly, I mean, because I'm a movement expert, I see things very much through a movement lens.
Hmm.
With physical competencies and skills, you can't push them
Hmm.
because it doesn't work. They simply
Can't
either
do it.
get bored, they can't do it, or they sit down and think it's funny. So you have to wait for them for the systems to mature enough for them to want to do it. So in that way, they are very, very good at gauging when they can and when they should take the next step.
Mm.
Hmm.
So in physical terms, as I said, you can't give them something that's incredibly complex and difficult because they can't do it. And
No.
it's obvious they can't do it. But yet, in every other developmental domain, they're being absolutely pushed and pushed and pushed from behind. And there is no evidence that actually this works, as
Hmm.
June said. Um, and often, children who've been very, very pushed in one domain decide that actually it's not for them, it's not interesting, they've had enough, and that's it.
Mm.
And we want our children to be interested in, yes, of course, in books and writing and all that, But that comes after a huge amount of experience of rhyme and movement and
Hmm.
language and imagination and actually doing things together in a group. And from that, written language will emerge in this very beautiful, wonderful way. But if you're pounding at them
Yeah.
from the minute they enter reception, it's, you know, when you see a line of little ones with these awful white wobbly boards and felt tips, and you think, what?
Yeah.
What is going on here? Is this really helping their love of writing and literature and whatever? Yes, so I think take a leaf out of the physical approach
Hmm.
because it really does work for them. Yes.
100%. No, I mean, you know as well that for me, it's the physicality of what they do. It's building those skills. I mean, we've had conversations before in the past about, encouraging children to run up hills or climb trees because they're building those muscles, which
Mm.
will, like you say, eventually lead on to, picking up a pen and mark making or writing and doing all of that. But, we need that play-based foundation. We call it the earliest foundation stage for a reason, because we're laying all those foundations, that love of literacy through
Mhm.
song and rhyme and storytelling, and all the physical skills that we do. Um, and it's all what we don't want is for all those foundations to be completely broken away when they go into a school setting where they're kind of getting lost in a sea of numbers because that's what school needs to do. They need to report this data, and there's that real sort of difficulty for everyone, really,
Yeah,
but
I
most
think this
importantly
is
for the
this
children.
is as we said at the beginning, it's this sort of misalignment, and
Hmm.
if you have a certain view of childhood, then you have to produce the data that justifies
Hmm.
what you're doing.
Mm.
And I think this may require, as I said, quite a severe pushback and a proper valuing of teachers' experience and knowledge and expertise so that we don't have daft tablets from crashing on our heads from on high
Hmm.
with yet another initiative or another something which doesn't align with our values and our principles and our expertise and our knowledge that's been
Hmm.
acquired over many, many, many years.
Mm. No, I agree.
100%. Well, time has crept up on us, but this has been it's been an absolute joy to kind of hear the passion, and kind of, for me, validation as well. I think that's a key word for me, the validation that, children are not numbers, that they are individuals, they are unique, and that's what they should be celebrated as, absolutely unique children. And, it's been an absolute joy to talk to both of you. So June and Lala, thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Glenn. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye bye.
Bye.